Hello and welcome to the Bombay Film Story, a podcast where we look at Bombay and films through the eyes of someone who's lived and grown up in both. My name is Mayank Shekhar, and with me is a director who one could rightly call a film buff's filmmaker. We've seen two features of his, Mard Ko Dard Nahi Hota and Monica Oh My Darling, both of which at many levels are essentially films about films, but they're still in the homage space. His show on Amazon Prime Video called Cinema Marte Dam Tak is a more direct documentary of cinema itself. It's in fact a documentary series on B-grade Hindi movies of the 90s and early 2000s. It's Bollywood's own Boogie Nights, if you insist. I'd actually urge you to watch the series first before you get into this conversation. It just makes more sense. And now that you're here, ladies and gentlemen, Director Vasan Bala. Thank you so much for joining us, Vasan, on the Bombay Film Story.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayank. Pleasure being here.
You know, I just finished watching your series, Cinema Marte Dam Tak, and it's really genuinely, for those, I'm pretty sure everyone who's listening in right now has seen it already, and please do, as I urged before. It's the secrets of the C-grade trade, isn't it?
The thing is, all these posters, all these films, these titles, these names have always been on our periphery. Right? And we've kind of blurred them out, or maybe even tried to sample a few and maybe not gone through with it over the years, over the past 30 years at least.
I think we've all sampled it and sample and tally, we just don't say it.
Exactly. Yeah. Probably that's true too. But once Orkut came in and, people started discussing Gunda over there, especially some IIT students, I think post that, it still was, a cue to find your tribe. Like, have you seen Gunda? Oh, I've seen Gunda. Do you know Kanti Shah? And then, that became a buzzword, at least within a select few. But then there were so many more as well. And if you go below Kanti Shah, or not below, sorry, below is not the word, but, people who were with him during that time, then it was a thriving industry that actually made a lot of money.
It's interesting you said the word below and you corrected yourself in the sense that, one calls them B-grade films or even C-grade films. What, according to you, Vasan, is the definition? Like, how do you define something as B-grade and something else as C-grade or A-grade for that matter?
We started calling them pulpy. Then I think Kunal Shah, the journalist, who's now a casting director, he came up with the term quickie. Asim Chandarkar, who is like a huge fan, he came up with terribly awesome films. And yeah, there are so many terms here. But actually what happened was B movies is like a legit term in the Hollywood industry. And B movies really didn't mean about the quantity. But when a studio bankrolled a film with an A-list star, they also simultaneously bankrolled a film with, the people who are on their payroll. So they weren't legit stars yet, but they were vehicles for them to become stars later, which they started calling B movies because there was their plan B. So, and then obviously there would be a double bill, but then the B movies over the last 60, 70 years, as it came to India, and we are very famously kind of putting people in their boxes, and it somehow became B grade. So probably the connotation here was to put them in their place in some way. And that is what is stuck as an industry term, rather.
Are you suggesting that B grade might be an Indian term and B movies is a legit thing from a plan B in Hollywood?
Exactly. So B movies is still a legit term, which is an industry term, which was a business term and not really categorizing for their quality. But the fact that studios used to have actors and directors on their payroll and they needed a steady income. Right. So which is how the B movie term came in. But B grade is more an Indian term. It's not really used in elsewhere.
So in your head, when you define it, Vasan, I mean, would you define it in terms of budget or the intention?
I think what happens here is the ambitions are tremendous. And there are zero resources to fulfill any of those ambitions. And ambition also needs to come together with aesthetics, intent, craft, and so many other things. But here, it is just ambition. And then, whatever you have to put with it, and you then you concoct something and come up with it. So which is why it becomes so unique. So in fact, increasingly over the past 10 years, I've met so many young directors, young filmmakers, even film school students who say they have a story with two people in a room. And I'm like, that's a setting, that's not a story. So, there itself, your ambitions just, gone. You're just a slave of your circumstances. But I think people who made these films, these pulpy films, they were not slaves of their circumstances. They still, in their minds, were making a blockbuster. They still were thinking it's about a hero, about the hero's circumstances. There should be a chase, there should be explosion, there should at least be a helicopter, if not a horse, or good-looking cars and good-looking people. I think they kind of made all this with whatever they saw as aesthetics, with whatever they thought is a rich person, or whatever they thought is a powerful person, or whatever they thought is a beautiful locale. I think that is why it becomes unique, is because it doesn't adhere to the popular aesthetics or what, but it is Kanti Shah or Kishan Shah or Jay Neelam or Dilip Gulati, their point of view of what blockbuster cinema is. So that kind of makes it so interesting. Is you can go to a mainland China or you can go to a Rikdi and it's still orange rice with some sort of ingredients in it, which is if you're healthy enough, then you can test your immune system, but it is tasty, at least for a while. So I think this cinema is that hard, probably, at least in the initial phase.
Yeah, so I'm presuming you mean the initial phase and not the bits that, of course, at some point in the conversation we'll get into, which is the horror and the porn industry. That's really the mainstay of the genre, isn't it?
Right. So what happens is, I think everyone, as you're entering the sea, you're like enjoying the beach first, then you get into the water a bit, then a little bit, and before you know, the tide kind of swallows you. So I think initially horror used to be made, but it was still not legit, and then suddenly people figured you don't need stars to make a horror film. Like Hemant Birje with a Deepak Sareen and a couple of young actresses, they can come together and you can take them to this Haveli and make a film and people will watch it. So that kind of became a secret formula wherein you didn't depend on the SAS system, wherein if you had your craft sorted, then you could have your cottage industry, you could approach new people and make a film and make a decent
film. When you're referring to this, Vasan, do you mean
the Ramsay era?
The Ramsay, that's who you mean, right? Yeah.
So they didn't wanted a mainstream audience. They didn't want a hush-hush audience. They still were looking forward for a slightly more mass acceptance. So they would stop with, say, a shower scene, and then a few voyeuristic angles of either the ghost or the hero. It just get muddled up, and in the second half, then it is just about saving the people from the ghost. So they kind of followed a still very acceptable template, wherein even you could borrow the VHS, watch it with a family. It wasn't still hush-hush. But what happened later on is the distributors became really powerful, and they started demanding certain things from the filmmakers, because these filmmakers, they would have some seed capital from somewhere. And then they would make a poster, a title, and on the poster there would be provocative things, and the title would mean that it will attract the audience. They try and pitch it to a distributor. Then the distributors, who have a lot of exhibitors under them, will pay them some money, and from the distribution money they made the films. And so later on, what happened was the distributors started saying, "Forget the story, just give me 10 minutes, 15 or 20 or half an hour of just porn." And that is when the imbalance started, and those who were desperate enough, who were stuck in this circuit and couldn't get out, because those days there was no studio, right? So it's usually you if you're not doing well, you're incurring debt, and then it's just a vicious cycle where you take more debt, then you're paying the interest off, and the principal probably never. And within that, you just become so desperate that you end up doing whatever it takes. So It was like a very vicious circle as it spiraled down.
Right. Of course, while this is seeming like a tragic story, it need not always be one, right? You start your film, your series with the shot of Kanti Shah ke Angur, which, if I'm not mistaken, is also a scene in Vikramaditya Motwane's Udaan.
Yes.
So basically, this is a tribute of a tribute of a tribute. It's like an inception of tributes, right? The starting of your series.
In fact, I had a conversation with Vikram as well, and we also had him as a talking head, but we couldn't find space to fit that in. So what Vikram said was, in the script of Udaan, what he said was, all these boys escape from the hostel to watch a naughty film. So then he went on to discover what are these naughty films, because there wasn't an idea. Then he thought, okay, Kanti Shah's Angur seems to be like, when they saw all the films, so he thought, this could be a film that he could showcase. And then there was this eternal hunt to find who owns the rights. So he also has gone through his kind of bylane search, wherein you never know who owns these films, who has the films, who made the film, who financed the film. It was somehow made, sold, and the money's been digested. Now no one knows where really the strings lead to. So it was that disorganized to start with.
So Kanti Shah, clearly, if we want to look at the lead protagonist in your series, Kanti Shah is the hero, isn't he?
So
because he's not a tragic story. He's the king. He's the boss. He's the guy who made the crores.
He's the most successful one, but this particular endeavor, he wasn't the story, because the problem with Kanti Shah is that he becomes the industry. And what we were very sure that Kanti Shah is a part of the industry, but not the industry. But then his myth is so huge, and also the money that he made, and it was lonely at the top because no one really came close to what he was doing. There was a danger of the voices getting drowned because of Kanti Shah.
So, given what you saw of the genre, Vasan, what was Kanti Shah doing, which was different from what the others were?
So, Kanti Shah actually had his craft sorted. The thing was, he started the per day system, wherein the per day cash system. So suddenly people like Kiran Kumar, Mukesh Khanna, all they were of course interested, but then suddenly Mithun was interested. Dharmender was interested. So what happened was they would he would say, I just require 2 days. I just require 3 days. And those portions would seem legit. Like, there wouldn't be double innuendo-filled dialogues. Those would be the clean portions. So when the superstars agreed, they are not a part of a naughty film as such. They're just a part of a decent seeming screenplay wherein they are the hero and, there's a villain and they are facing off and they're getting the per days. But what he would do with that footage is just shoot the remaining with everything else possible. Like you have the Daku, or you have the comedy, you have all the dialogues and everything else. And he was a master at stitching all this together very well. So all his close-ups and his wides, the stunt double. So, there was a certain craft attached to what he was doing. He could take stock footage and very decently merge it with his film. And you could just see the story flow without it being too jerky. He had his craft sorted. So that we have to give it to him. He was a very astute businessman, because he understood they are not going to come here for a story, but, when he's giving cash, that too upfront, he's saying, take the cash and then come to shoot with me. So he kind of created new precedents, and which was unheard of in this industry. So, and the confidence that he had in himself that, I'm paying you upfront, you come, you give me just 2 days, and that seemed okay. And also, those posters were not going to be in front of the bungalows, right? So you never know. You just do this job, you take the money, it seemed legit, there's nothing bad around it. You're not mounting insane lines. And it all seemed fair, because probably it'll be playing in some theater far away.
Right. So effectively what you're looking at, Vasan, is a director or perhaps an editor who is very good with stitching footage, picking up stuff from other places and making his film seem big budget, with a lot of action sequences and lots of cars and rickshaws and all those things, right? Absolutely. The other thing that he could do is use footage of his own film and merge it with another movie. And there is reference in your series to a sequence where Dharmender is there and he is riding a horse, but in the movie, in the Kanti Shah film, he's riding a woman.
Yeah. So that is why I think he crossed the line. Because if he hadn't done that, it wouldn't have become an issue. I think this is what happens with them is, it's the Icarus thing. Like you're earning money with stars. Just be happy with Mithun being a part on your poster. Just be happy with Dharmender on your poster. But then he crossed the line and kind of paid for it too. Because after that, this wasn't the same anymore. Like, no one, even the per day incentive wasn't good enough.
Could you find that footage though? It's not there in your series.
No one knows where it is. It's destroyed. And that is what Kanti Shah also says, bring me proof.
Ah,
So he kind of dismisses it as an effort to malign him. But so yeah, there is no footage that is there. But obviously, it's a famous and which is what kept happening with them is if the previous film probably didn't do well, then you're tempted to cross the line in the next one to just get in that extra buck because you're in debt now, and you have to pay the debt and also make money. So that's what started happening when they started crossing the line. Is then those who really couldn't, they just gave up, and those who could, they kept going on uh, with whatever they could. So yeah, so that this was around 2004, 2005, and it was just not that, like decolonization, right? World War II, so many things happened.
sure,
Here
sure.
too, the multiplexes were also coming in. Internet was just starting about.
Right.
The VCDs were already in circulation. DVDs
Sure.
were yet to come, but still in circulation. So,
Right.
so your erotica consumption avenues just started spreading.
Absolutely.
And the Bhojpuri cinema had just started getting a whiff of this. I think in Patna it happened that the theaters started getting raided, and then the distributors started. Exhibitors were afraid. Then the distributors were afraid.
So there is the moment in your series, Vasan, where a character talks about the fact that they put what is called the bits. They
Yeah.
put a portion where it's actually a scene between a girl and between a boy and a girl, and they're actually siblings, and they managed to put it because the person didn't know and put
Yeah.
and that led. Is that the raid in Patna that you're talking about?
No, that is not the raid. I think the raid was some police officer's son was caught in those theaters, and it reached his father, and the father was then started investigating, and then of course closed, shut everything down. So that
Right.
probably was the story.
Right.
But here, because they don't know what story they're telling, and when the scene is cut, and when those bits enter, so it would also operate on time, as they said. They would all know between 4 to 4, which is what started happening. From one scene, the bits turned to 15 minutes to half an hour to
Pretty much the whole
everything,
film.
all that. Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, cinema, Marte Dam Tak, of course, is also behind the scenes of 4 films being shot, being made by 4 directors of the time, of that era, of the genre. Talwar, Gulati, Neelam, and Kanti Shah's brother. Right now, Kishan. Now, take us through that process. Like, one, it's a fascinating idea. It's brilliant. Well done, Vasan. Two, can we see these films? If I'm not mistaken, these are called Jungle Girl, Shanti Basera, Swatan Bani Chudail, and Bloodsuckers. How long did it take for them to make these films?
Right. So why we made the series, first of all, is majority of them really wanted to be filmmakers. It is the few who really pushed it and kind of just blew everything apart. And if you meet all of them started legit. Like Kishan Shah's first film, Police Lockup, is actually questioning custodial death. It's an argument between a police officer and a lawyer about how right it is and how wrong it is, even though both are trying to keep the law and order in check. Obviously, it is not, the narrative is not that nuanced, or the performances and all is questionable, but the thought is that that's where he started. He lost all his money, and then Kishan Shah became Kishan Shah of the other films, of Maut Ke Piche Maut. Vinod Talwar started with an adaptation of a Punjabi novel, which he took great pains to get the rights from, because it was an author who was alive, and of a celebrated author. He made the film with his own money, and the 84 riots broke out, and his film never saw the light of day. He was in extreme debt, and someone just suggested that just make a slightly massier film, which has a bit of this, and maybe you'll find distributors for it. And that's where he ended up making Raat Ke Andhere Mein. And Jay Neelam wanted to be an actor, but ended up being a producer. And one day when a rift happened on the set, she had to step up and become the director. So that's how she became the director. So and Dilip Gulati was the maker. He was Mr. O.P. Rallan's nephew. So he kind of grew up in the cream of the industry. But Mr. O.P. Rallan himself was making racy films. Not racy, but still racy, but very acceptable, interesting thrillers of those times. So they all come from such different aspects of the society, wherein Jay Neelam has seen the riots. She has had personal loss because of the 84 riots. So they've all come from various places, and somehow cinema was the thing that gave them employment, dreams, courage, everything. So all these stories are really hopeful. But what happened beyond that kind of went out of hand, and I'm sure none of them wanted to be here.
Okay.
Everyone wanted to start from a respectable place. But then I think you just stumble upon things for survival, and then that becomes your identity. And probably then you're a little too deep into the game to think of anything else, but just be around this so that you at least earn a living. So that's what happened to them. But to start with, I think they all are incredibly amazing characters. And also what happened was when we started, that is when Samira called me about the show, and then we went to Amazon and we discussed. So we came up with a structure. So our research head, Pritish Srivastav, he had given us a list of some 50 names. But then most of them were very reluctant to talk. A lot of them still wanted to be off the radar. Just fearing if they come in the forefront, then, the past might catch up. So that kind of filtered out. A lot of them had also sold their life rights to a couple of people. So we couldn't approach them. So then we found all of the Jay Neelam, Kishan Shah, Dilip Gulati, and Mr. Talwar, and they were more than willing to come. Obviously, it took a lot of time because all our directors, Disha, Zulfi, Kulish, producers, Riya, Vatsala, Harshita, Pratika, Bhujna, Moby, relentless calling, and through the pandemic, just convincing them that we are legit. So it was the other way around, that we aren't making.
It's not a hit job.
Yeah, and we are not doing a Channel V MTV spoof.
Right.
This is about you, and the fact that it's not about our aesthetics, but it's about your aesthetics. And we will put you in the foreground, and we will show it in your voice. And so that that took a lot of conversations. And once they became a part of the show, and once the films started getting made, and all their schedules were like 4 to 5 days of shoot, nothing more than that.
4 to 5 days, an entire feature film.
Yeah, so this wasn't a feature; it was almost like a 35 to 40-minute short film.
Right.
For Kishan, it was like 1.5 days of work.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's it. And then because he had 5 days, he just kept shooting a little bit. But Mr. Talwar was the most serious. He really needed more days. He had a lot written. There was a very clear vision that he wanted to follow. His short breakdowns were very clear. Actually, all of them are great editors. They all understand the value of film, the value and the economy of shots. They all understand that. And they were very serious about it. They were very serious about the characters, the setting, the kind of locations they wanted, the kind of aesthetics they needed. And those things they were very serious about. So which was very heartening to see that, they're wanting to come back into the game. It is still aching. It is not a lazy job. Especially Mr. Talwar. He really was tensed before the shoot because he wanted to make a great impression. And that was really endearing to see the way he was prepping.
Not just these 4 filmmakers, but also the list of 50 that you had.
Yeah.
It's been almost 20 years. What do they do for a living? How do they make a living?
So a couple of them have acting classes. A couple of them are just selling one by one negative, for very cheap. And some are trying to be actors. It's a tough life.
Okay.
A tough life, yeah.
Right. And tough life for Kanti as well?
So he does have his own house, but because it's too lonely at the top, and he's alienated everyone. Because, he was just so far ahead of everyone, and there's a very gangster attitude to living, as in you're constantly looking at your back, and you're just depending only on yourself and how alert you are, because then you're just not so trusting. So I think Kanti didn't believe in creating that community, wherein Jay Neelam has a very beautiful community. She lets people stay at her house. She supports a lot of people financially also. She takes a lot of people under her wings and guides them. So she's built a beautiful community around her. Vinod Talwar is a family man. Dilip Gulati is a family man. Kishan has a family. He's obviously dealing with his own demons, but still not alienated people around him. But
did you ask Kanti to also make a film for you, as in to be part of it in that sense?
We did initially, but then the money he asked for, we couldn't afford. Yeah, but he did. He's a sharp guy.
Also what I loved, and some people might see it as delusion, but I know it's not. Is like, for instance, the first time that I saw Kanti Shah was at the Golden Kela Awards, and you have a footage from the award in your series, right? And he was being given the Lifetime Achievement Award, but I don't think it mattered to him that the award is called Kela. And he genuinely gave a 15-minute speech, about his life and how he was moved. And right. Sapna came as well, and she did the same.
Yes.
Did you feel that about everyone?
I think everyone's smart enough in the sense because they have children of like teenage and much elder, and they have seen the world around. They kind of know the impact. They understand where their parents come from. So they are very aware now. Those conversations have been had. So I didn't see delusion in that sense, but I saw, especially for filmmaking, a very naive excitement. Which was very heartwarming. Let's try and get to the mainstream. Let's try and be legit. Let's try and reach out with our stories. So I don't, but I think everyone's very aware. The conversations are around. Social media is around. If we are not on social media, at least there are people talking to them about it.
So I mean, at one level, even when say Mr. Gulati is talking about David Lean or Raj Kapoor and Mukul Anand. I mean, he knows what he's making, right?
What I feel is, I think he makes whatever he can, but I think he's a great salesman. And every time he meets, he talks about a scene, talks about a script. He gives one of the greatest narrations. Even if you're understanding that this is not a film I'm ever going to watch, but I'm so taken in with his passion and his will to make a sale pitch, close the deal. And he'll do everything within his vocabulary, within his knowledge to impress you, to schmooze you, to kind of, just make sure that, you have his attention and just close the deal. And that's the spirit with which he comes for every meeting, even when there is no deal. So which is great, which is amazing.
Right.
And he's at it. I mean, though it might, be tough for him to even take a sip of chai from a cup, but his spirit is undeniably amazing. He's very sharp that ways.
Personally, for you, Vasan, as a person of films yourself, as someone who does this for a living as well, how different or how similar did you find your own story to be from these four people you were profiling?
I think the only thing we might differ with, say, aesthetic and gaze and those things, but the struggle is the same because we were also the Aramnagar lads. We've also been with Anurag, knowing it's really tough to make a film. Resources aren't going to be there. It's the camera, the lens, and the truth within the frame and not what is outside the frame. So we all have come from relatively extremely less resources and have been trained in trying to not curtail the ambition, but just be very agile about just jumping in and out of your situations. Because even when I was an AD, I knew nothing will go as planned. No location that you'd seen a month ago will be available. Like even for Monica or My Darling, we prepped entirely thinking we're going to shoot in Pune, and we ended up not shooting one day in Pune. So I think we come from similar school. Like even Kashyap had told me that in Black Friday the entire film was finished, but there was the beginning seemed to be missing. So and there was obviously no money, and so the scene where Nawaz says that dhamaka hone wala hai. So they just put chai ka pani on a wall and just shot there. That was a jail, and that was the opening. So we come from the same school, yeah. That the vision is the guiding force, the North Star. And then everything else is, the boat could be anything. The boat or a ship, it didn't matter.
Over the years, this is to end this particular episode of the Bombay Film Story. Over the years, and that you've been a filmmaker, Vasan, whether as an assistant or thereafter making features, short films, and now a documentary series. If these are amazing people you get to meet as well, as you have for this. What would be your favorite Bombay film story? Like someone you met? It could be Anurag because he's a mentor of sorts to you. What's the like something that happened that told you so much about films per se, but also about Bombay and that just has so many of these mad, crazy film buffs trying to make movies.
Being in Bombay, it's a strange thing because you might actually get to see a film star. And you will also in your lifetime.
Yeah.
And especially if you're growing here, then in your childhood, you would see someone. And that was the first story when we were in Mahatma Gandhi swimming pool. There was our school would take us to swim over there. And I was swimming and I saw Gulshan Grover and I froze. But everyone in the pool started running away. And I was like, why are you all running? This is Gulshan Grover right in front of you. And they were like, Amir Khan is outside. and I started running out in my trunks. And there was this long line of everyone trying to get an autograph of Amir Khan. And my own friends, they didn't give me a pen. And there was no paper. And everyone was like pushing and prodding. And then I took a 4 square ka packet that was discarded, opened it, somehow snatched a pen. And by that time, Amir had left. So I had that Slumdog Millionaire moment in my swimming trunks. I think he was shooting for Love, Love, Love.
Okay.
Then I recollect, or put two to two together, there was a swimming scene. So that was like my first tryst with, movie stars are real, they're there. And it didn't matter, he was 5'5" or whatever. He was Amir Khan. So it started over there. Then over the period, it is like, oh, you're growing up in Matunga, so Madan Puri lives here. Shashi Kapoor used to come to the library. Those would be the kind of folklore.
Doesn't Matunga also have the Hollywood Lane, which is where a lot of movie stars used to? It was legit movie star capital, right?
Yeah, KN Singh and all those people lived, and then obviously it moved to Chembur, and then came to Juhu, Khar. Actually, Khar, then Juhu, and then now everywhere.
Right.
So growing up, you heard all these stories, but still, it was furthest away from your mind to even become a filmmaker. But yeah, eventually, then had to take the call, take the plunge, because being in films was just sounded so nonsensical. It was just such a faraway dream, which is why someone like a Kashyap is so important, that he was almost like a if you have no one, just come to me, and we wouldn't have found a footing otherwise. In a way, we are all people who are stuck to the wall, right? In a party, like you never know when to take the center stage. You're just observing the party from the wall, and your conversations are people who have taken the wall on your left and right. So, and these are the people, right? And also when I was watching films, I was always curious about who is henchman number 3. Like, oh, he's Manek Irani. Oh, he's Mahesh Anand. And you try and read these names. Because, you understand that these are also actors. They could have a life, but they seem cool people. Or at least, they're having some interesting physique. So I was always curious about the periphery as well, and not just the main lead. And just as you grew up, you kind of understood that Bachchan with Manmohan Desai is a different Bachchan. Bachchan with Rishikesh Mukherjee seems different. Bachchan with Mukul Anand seems different. Bachchan with Yash Chopra suddenly seems different. So then you understood, oh, there is a director, and who's doing these things behind the scenes. And then, of course, Mani Ratnam, Ram Gopal Verma, and then you're like, this seems legit, man. I mean, these guys came out of nowhere and are telling my stories, or the stories I relate to. So, in fact, just today I was for an ad film, I was wrecking at Poonawalla Bungalow, and I was like, oh, love was shot here. This is where Revati stood. This is where Andaz Apna Apna was shot. And this is where I met Ramu for the first time. So it just brought back so many memories of the films that I've seen, a real life incident that happened to me, and now I will be shooting in that place. So I kind of include myself in that Bollywood legacy in a way, even though, you come from outside. But, these are the things that make me an insider maybe, or, gives me that validation that I'm a part of this industry in a very legit way. The constant feeling of being on the peripheral is always there. And probably, which is why there is a soft corner to understand Kishan Shah, Dilip Gulati, Vinod Talwar, Jay Neelam.
So, and speaking of these 4 people that you brought up, Vasan, I mean, the fact is that these stories never really end, do they? And it's not only these 4 people, it's a whole world out there. You did briefly bring up what happened later. And in the sense that, yeah, we were looking at Bhojpuri cinema that became quite popular in the early 2000s. There's also, of course, the corporates that came in that sort of made the system a little more legit. There is, I'm presuming, also the whole Mahesh Bhatt, Mukesh Bhatt films, right? Which just made these movies a little more A-grade in terms of the aesthetics and the look and the design, isn't it?
Right. True. And with music, and great music.
And there's, of course, the internet, and the smartphone. Is there a sequel to Cinema Marte Dam Tak?
I don't know. We've just been chatting and we've decided to get on a call today, tomorrow, day after, and see and discuss. But because this itself was such a shot in the dark, and kudos to the excitement of Samira from Vice and Aparna, Akriti, and Prashant from Amazon. And they were in it. I mean, this is one project that needed no convincing in that sense. We were like, we are all in it. Now let's figure out the logistics. So which was great, and was persisted over 3 years. So we didn't know. We obviously understood how we are making this, but we never know how it's going to come out and be received, because the market will always say this is too niche, or who's even going to watch this? How are we going to educate the Gen Z, and all those terms that come in. So, but this has really been heartwarming. Obviously, there are so many stories left to say. So obviously, if this has become a platform, then yeah, we definitely try to explore more.
Vasan Bala, I hope you continue to tell the Bombay film stories. This was amazing series. Great chatting with you, and hope there is a sequel to the show as well, because the show mustn't end.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.